Welcome to the Artist Advocate. I'm your host, Althea Rene, and this is your one stop for all things music related. So, my guest today is Jason Gorov from Gorov Music Marketing. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Althea. How are you?
I'm really good. Really excited to talk to you and have you talk to all of the artists and upcoming independent artists.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm excited too, and thank you very much for inviting me to be on your show today.
Yeah, I know we've worked together several times,
Oh,
and
yes.
and it's always an enjoyable. It's a rocky road, but not on your part. I always feel safe, and I always feel like I'm in good hands. So
Well, thank you. If I remember, we worked with you and your music back when you were still in Detroit, and that has to be 25, maybe even 30 years ago now, right?
my very first CD or app, no CD was probably 2000. So yeah, you're right. I mean, time
Wow.
just yeah, and it was your dad, Cliff. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Wow. So can you tell us how you got started, in this business?
Sure. So our company, Gorov Music, is a family business. And so I grew up around, music and radio promotion because that's what my dad did. And I can remember as a small boy going into my dad's office with him and listening to him and his employees on the phones with radio promoting pop music at the time, bands like Kool and the Gang and the Gap Band and Yarborough and Peoples, and they'd be on the phones swearing and smoking. And what do you mean next week? No, I need you to add it this week. And I thought to myself, this is what I want to be doing. And so when I graduated college in 1991, thankfully, Dad had saved a spot for me in his business, and I joined the company then. And so I'm going on my 33rd year of promoting music at Gorov Music.
Wow.
And
That
I'd
is
also like to add that my son Jordan is a part of our business now. And so it's kind of cool for me to watch everything come full circle, and that everything that my dad did to teach and mentor me 30 some years ago, I'm now in that same mentoring process with my own son.
wow.
Working out great.
That's great. That's great. And it's a good business to be in, but I know that it's gone through so many changes, just so many changes. I think when I first came in the business, there were still record labels and the whole thing was still trying to get a record deal and everything. But how important is radio promotion for independent artists, their careers and the marketing strategy in today's music?
Yeah, I don't think there's any more powerful tool, promotional tool for recording artists than radio airplay and charting on the radio. And I like to, draw a comparison. I like to say that radio airplay and charting are kind of like the border to the marketing puzzle, and that all of the other pieces of the puzzle fit together more easily once that border has been established. In other words, it's probably going to be easier to get booked to perform in a city if you're already getting airplay in that city. And then it would be easier to get publicity in that city if you've got a tour booked. So in my opinion, it is the most important and powerful tool that's available to any artist.
Right. And I know that you don't just take any artist. What is some of your criteria for even working with an artist?
It's really all about the songs and the music. And if they've got a great song that fits smooth jazz, chances are good that we're going to want to work with them. The problem comes if we get something that's really not smooth jazz, or maybe just not that good to our ears. And of course, music is art, and art is subjective.
Right.
But for us, it's really all about the music. And if the music is great, whether you're an established artist or an up and coming artist or anywhere in between, if the music is great, we're going to want to work with you.
Okay. I think that's really important because a lot of times, if you're doing a whole project, then you have room to do other types of, within the jazz or, within a genre. But I think when you think about radio, you definitely have to think about the, your audience And yeah, I
And
think
I'd
that's
like to add, radio, it really is just one arm of the marketing machine. There's all these other elements that go into the marketing of a recording artist. I just happen to think that radio is kind of like the dominant right arm of the marketing machine.
great, great, great. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of like being on a record label versus indie?
So there's advantages and disadvantages to both. So first, let's talk about being on a record label. So, generally speaking, the record label is going to pay for all of the marketing costs. And so not just radio promotion, but publicity or social media or any other marketing for that matter. So that's one big advantage, of going with a record label is, they are going to cover the marketing costs for you. Mm-hmm. But to me, the biggest drawbacks are really twofold. The first one is you're going to give up control by going with a label, because if they're paying for things, they're going to want to do it their way, and their way might not be your way as an artist. So you're going to lose some control. And then the other thing you're going to lose is probably some ownership of your master recordings or royalties. Sound exchange royalties in our format can be quite lucrative, and if you're on a label, the chances are good that they're going to take some portion of your sound exchange royalties.
Yeah, that's definitely true, and that's something that I guess you have to weigh out, because it is definitely expensive, whether you do a whole project, 8 or 9, 10 songs, or whether you're just doing an EP, 3 songs, or if you just do a single. It's not going to be a cheap thing. And I think sometimes, artists think, well, I'll just do everything myself. I'll just do, because, you can do things on your computer. You can do some things. But I think that when you do everything on your computer, it a lot of times doesn't have the sound quality.
Well, and I think you're right about that. And you're right also that it's not a cheap endeavor to release music on your own. But one thing I'd like to point out is that in our genre, smooth jazz, it's really one of the only radio formats that even allows for promotion by indie artists. The costs are just too prohibitive in any of the other bigger, let's say, rock or pop or AC type formats. It costs a fortune. For smooth jazz, the cost is relatively affordable, and the stations will play music by independent artists, whereas in other formats, the labels have most of the control over what gets played.
Would you say that gospel is more expensive?
I don't know about gospel. I just don't have any experience in that world, so I don't know what those costs are. But I've heard other commercial radio formats, like I said, rock, pop, AC, and others, cost somewhere around 10 times what it costs to take a song to smooth jazz radio.
Wow. So when you're like trying to get a strategy together, how does that differ across genres?
Well, smooth jazz is the only genre that we promote to, so I can only answer how the strategy works for our format. I'm just not sure about the other formats because I've never really promoted in them.
Okay, and I'm really more interested in smooth jazz, because that's what I'm promoting in terms, because that's where my experience and people that like yourself, that I'm interviewing are speaking about. So, in the smooth jazz, and especially artists wanting to get into this genre.
So the main strategy that I would say we employ is that, for the first roughly 4 to 6 weeks of a radio promotion campaign, we're really in what I call the hunting and gathering phase, where we're really just focusing on trying to get as many stations as possible to add and play the song. Okay. We're really not working on pushing spins for the first roughly 4 to 6 weeks, because it would just be too soon. If we were to start pushing spins right away, our radio friends might say to us something like, "Hey, I just added it. I'm not ready to move up the rotation." Once they've been playing it for 4 to 6 weeks, then we can start pushing those spins and those rotation increases. So hunting and gathering for the first 4 to 6 weeks, and then working on rotations.
So are people still calling in like back in the day to request a record, or are they emailing, or how are they, how are you getting?
Not much of it at all. And I think, what's happened is if a radio station were to get too many requests for the same song in a short time period, they figured out that it's probably a friends and family push. The other thought is that in adult radio formats like smooth jazz mostly is, most of the adults don't really have time to call and request the song. Now, every now and again, sure, that's possible that it could happen, but not on a widespread basis, not like we used to know it.
Okay. So would you, and I know I'm kind of going off script, but that's just because these questions are coming up. I mean, like when you do like a 6-week run, do you recommend, is 6 weeks enough? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Well, if the song is a hit, no, 6 weeks is not enough, but we kind of test the waters for the first 6 to 8 weeks to see what kind of response and what kind of reaction we're getting, and see how many stations we've been able to gather in those first roughly 6 or 8 weeks. And then if, and most of our campaigns do start, with roughly 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay.
But for those first 6 to 8 weeks, if the song is doing well and we feel like there's more room for continued growth, more new ads, more chart position, rotation increases, then we would extend to what we call our Life of Single campaign, which is for a minimum of 16 weeks or sometimes longer, depending on where we're at on the charts.
Okay.
So that strategy differs a little bit from what other promoters do. There are other promoters who just go straight for the life of the single, but we found our strategy to be pretty effective. Test the waters for the first 6 weeks. If it's working, then convert to the life of the single.
Well, you guys definitely have enough experience under your belt to know, and so yeah. I've always enjoyed, and I've always charted well, and you've always been honest, and I think that's really the big thing is like, hey, here's the deal, and I think that's what you want to know, that your money is being spent well, and it's being utilized, and you're being upfront, and so that's all you can do.
And I have to be that way. And that's one thing my dad taught me from the very beginning is be honest with people. Maybe sometimes the truth might hurt, but you have to be honest with people.
Yeah.
So you're always going to get it straight from me.
Okay. So what does an artist have to fulfill to work with you? Once you've accepted them and everything, what are some of the things they need to do?
So there's a list of assets that we need in order to take a song to radio, and some exciting news that I'll start with that we're really just starting to do this year in 2024, and most artists seem pretty happy, and that is we're no longer asking artists or labels to send a physical CD to radio, and for the longest time we were, because and I get it. I mean, digital delivery is quicker and easier and greener, and there's just lots of advantages to doing it that way, but there are still a handful of radio stations who prefer or even require a physical CD to be sent to them in order to play it. And so for those stations, we've got a computer, we can burn our own discs here, and so we will take care of the servicing to radio, and so that's going to save artists a lot of time and effort and money.
That's great. Couple more questions. What about holiday music? How do you handle holiday music?
So we do promote holiday music every year, but I will tell you and your listeners and viewers, there's not a lot of bang for your buck with releasing holiday music at radio because of a very short time frame for airplay. Smooth jazz is not like adult contemporary where they're already playing wall-to-wall Christmas music in early November. For smooth jazz, most smooth jazz stations don't even start playing Christmas music until after Thanksgiving, and even then it kind of trickles in late November and early December, but then by mid-December it really kind of picks up and increases, and the majority of the airplay would come between, let's just say, the 15th and the 25th of December, but by the 26th in most cases most stations are done with holiday music and they're back to their regular programming on December 26th.
But I guess the benefits of releasing a holiday track is that the next year it can be played again.
It's timeless. Absolutely. Good point. If we're going to be getting airplay 1 year on a Christmas song, we really don't need to go out and re-promote it next year or in any subsequent years, because like you just said, it's going to be a part of the station's library, and chances are it'll get played year after year. So we do like to consider Christmas music as timeless.
Okay, that's wonderful. Last question. So in your opinion, what does the future of radio and radio promotion look like?
So what do they say? The future is so bright, I've got to wear shades. The format is in a great position right now. There's over 150 broadcasting platforms around the globe that play smooth jazz. It's a mixture of AM radio, FM radio, satellite radio, cable TV, syndicated shows, streaming radio, and I think it's just going to continue to grow and get bigger and bigger. In terms of radio promotion into the future, one thing that we've talked about within our company is the possibility. Now we haven't started doing it yet, but the possibility that we could start promoting for Spotify playlists.
Oh, okay.
The actual broadcast radio.
Oh, okay. Nice.
So I think if there's an easy answer about what does the future hold, I think it has to do a lot with Spotify and streaming.
Great. I tell you, there's no better feeling than when I'm taking a flight and I'm waiting on the flight and then I hear a flute and I say, that sounds familiar.
Nothing like hearing your own music on the radio.
Right, or you're on an elevator or
in an airport or a restaurant or anywhere like that.
Yeah.
Sure is good. And Althea, if we've got a minute, I'd like to go back to your question about what does it take, what does an artist need to do once we've agreed to take their song to radio. And I started talking about how we're no longer requiring CDs, so we send out a list of about 5 different assets that we would need sent to us about a month before we go to radio. And the first one would be a 16-bit WAV file.
Okay.
We would then put that in our online Dropbox for radio to download. In addition to the WAV file, we also need the cover art for the single or the album. Okay, we need the ISRC code for whatever song we're promoting. And I should add that, let's say, there's a song that's maybe a little too long. Let's say on the album it's over 5 minutes, and we say, hey, can you do a shorter version for radio and get it down to under 430 roughly? We would need a separate ISRC code for the radio version. So every different mix or edit that goes out to radio does need to have its own separate ISRC code, which you can get from your distributor.
Okay.
In addition to those assets, we just need all the song credits and the writers of the song, because what we do is we add in all the metadata to the MP3. And so the metadata is really just the artist name, the song title, the ISRC code, album title, and any other information that we have about it, the songwriters especially. So we need all the song credits, including the writers. And then the last thing would be some sort of new bio or press release or one sheet that just gives a little bit of information that we can share with the radio stations about you and your musical history and about the current song that we're going to be promoting. And then once you've delivered all those assets to me, Althea, 95% of the artist job is done. We kind of take over from there. Handle it for you from there.
Wow, that's great. So on the mix, if you hear a song that you like and but the mix is not smooth enough, are there recommendations where you say, hey, you got to do another mix on this, or is that a thing?
It's delicate, but we have a diplomatic way of saying that can we introduce you to an outside producer or an outside mixing engineer who might be able to help you with this.
And I have to interject and say that it's probably better, in my experience, that I've let you hear songs before I actually mixed it, and then that way I can kind of get your feedback on it before you mix, and it saves you a lot.
Listen to rough mixes, and I have like roughly an 80% rule. So once the mix is roughly what you feel is about 80% done or more, that's a good time to send it to me to listen to. But if it's less than 80% done, it's going to be a little bit more difficult.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, that is great information. I'm gonna, of course, we're gonna add all the information for our listeners, and I know this is really, this podcast is like just packed with information. So I was really, really excited to do this and speak to you.
And I was so excited when you reached out to me on this. And thank you again for having me. It's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you so much, Jason. All right.
All right.
Hey,
Have a
this
good
is
rest of
your
your
girl
afternoon.
Althea Rene, and I'm hosting my first Smooth Jazz Cruise, and I hope to see you there. Foster Perry Travel presents Jazz on the Water, October 13th through October 20th. We will rock the high seas with my musical guest, the saxophone sensation discovered by Prince, B.K. Jackson, and James Lloyd, the keyboard killer from Pieces of a Dream. We'll also be dancing the night away with Houston's line dance leader, Janice My Style Davis. We sail on Royal Caribbean's new luxurious cruise ship, the Wonder of the Seas, from Port Canaveral, Florida, visiting the beautiful East Caribbean, docking in Coco Cay, St. Thomas, and St. Martin. Get your cabins now at AltheaReneJazzCruise.com.